Hey guys, welcome to Buffalo Bros Podcast. I'm Aiden. Next to me, we got Dom, and we got guest John Murphy joining us today. Um, got a few questions to ask him here. So, first question is, how did you get into sports media and broadcasting?
Yeah, it was a long time ago. It's almost hard to remember that long ago. But I got into broadcasting first, I guess. I went to Syracuse University and majored in broadcast journalism, and came home to Lockport, Buffalo area, Lockport, and I went to law school for a year because I thought I wanted to do it, but I didn't like it. I hated it. So I started working in radio in Niagara Falls and in Lockport. And in Lockport, WLVL, they still do it. They had a pretty extensive high school sports coverage team. We did play-by-play for high school football in that part of Niagara County and high school basketball. And I sort of got into that, always being a sports fan, and kept it going. I went to WBEN radio, did news primarily there. But they had Bills football play-by-play on WBEN, and they needed somebody to produce the 2-3 hour pregame show. So I started doing that and did interviews. And then in 1984, which is a long time ago, the color man, Stan Barron, got sick right before the season began. And I was like the nearest suspect. They asked me if I would do it, and I said, sure. And I worked alongside Van Miller for a long time. And so I guess that's how I got started. Switched over to sports primarily at BEN, and then got a job at Channel 7, the ABC affiliate in Buffalo, and subsequently Channel 4, the CBS affiliate, and just kept on working in sports after that. But I think that's how I got started. It's not like a straight line, there's a lot going on, but I think it worked out okay.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So now we're going to be talking about our beloved Bills here. So first question here is, how different was it calling home games last year without any fans? Like, how different was the atmosphere? I feel like it was probably going to be obviously a lot quieter coming from one of the loudest stadiums in the NFL. But what were the other differences in that?
I mean, it wasn't much fun. I can be completely honest about that. It was it was missing. There were a couple games, and it started out, I think it was week 3 when the Bills played the Rams in Orchard Park at then Bills Stadium, and they had a 23-point lead, and then they blew a 23-point lead, and then came back and won the game over the Rams. It was an incredible game, and the Rams were really highly regarded and a really good team. And I'm walking out, and I said to my partner, Steve Tasker, fans would have loved this game. People would have loved this game. They would have gone berserk. They have their team jump out to an early lead, and then to see that lead get away, and then to finally get it back and win the game. And there were a couple of other occasions, home games, kind of like that. The win over the Patriots in was that late December? No, it was October. Well, they beat them twice, but November 1st, they beat them in Orchard Park, which was great. There were a couple of home games where you're just shaking your head saying, man, fans would have eaten this up. And that really bothered me. It was different. Without that noise in the background, home games and road games, we kind of had piped in noise for the road games, but it was different, and I missed it. We had real live fans for the 2 playoff games in January, and that made a difference. In fact, the fans made enough noise to create problems for their opponents, the Colts and the Ravens. And yeah, it was different. There was a certain energy that was lacking, and you really got to hand it to the players, Bills players, many of whom had never heard that noise before, and others who were just getting used to it after the last year or two, and they did pretty good without it. They won 13 games, so they managed to get around it. But it was a different atmosphere, and there was energy lacking, I think. Once the game began and doing play-by-play, there's just a lot to do. I found myself not missing it as much as maybe in the commercial breaks and timeouts when normally there'd be a steady din. But once the game, once the play started, I didn't miss it as much. But I'm really looking forward to having fans there this year. I think, and I think the fans should look forward to it too. They missed some great action last year, and there's no reason to think they won't be just as great this year.
Yeah. So speaking of away games, was it challenging having to call games where you weren't at the stadium?
Yeah. I mean, the noise is one thing, the crowd noise, as we just talked about, and I'll get back to that in a second. But there's certain things, we're working off monitors, video monitors. We had 3 monitors right in front of us, provided by, we paid for it, I guess, with Bills and Entercom Radio, but provided by CBS or Fox or ESPN, ABC, whoever's doing the game. But On one monitor was kind of an overhead view, like a 50-yard line view, kind of an all 22 look, if anybody's ever done that on NFL.com, which helps because you can see substitutions being made and you can see at least alignments that help. And that's something you would see normally watching a game, home or away. And then the other two monitors, one typically for Steve last year, one for me, was sort of the live feed, almost a little bit. It was better than the TV feed at home, but it was, you got the close-ups and, ISOs and stuff. And if you think about it, when you watch a game on network TV, an NFL game, there's an awful lot of face shots. There's an awful lot of people sweating and people inside their helmet and people talking. And as a play-by-play guy, those do me no good. I don't need to see what Josh Allen looks like in his helmet. I kind of have a sense of what that is. What I really needed was who's checking in and out of the game and how are they lined up, and is it 3 wide receivers or 2, and are they lined up in shotgun? And we were able to get that, but it wasn't as good as being there, and it was. I probably have to relearn how to do it if we're traveling again on the road, because you sort of train your eyes to look for things like how are they lined up. I like to. It's easier for home teams, but for the Bills' opponents, the visitors, I like to know who's their typical slot receiver and the third wide receiver, and who comes in if they use a fourth wide receiver, and double tight ends, who's the second one, and how do they normally line up. Well, if you don't have control over what you're seeing, which you don't, you're kind of a creature of whatever they're feeding you on video. So you have to kind of teach yourself after a game or two, hey, don't look at this the way you normally look at it. You only got one look at it here, and you got to take what they give you. So that was hard to learn how to do. And yeah, the noise, I mean, I'll tell you, there are times, and over the years I've done broadcasts, when my favorite parts, and I like home games, but my favorite parts of road games, if the Bills win, is kind of the deafening silence of the crowd, when they become aware that, oh shoot, my team, the Patriots or the Cowboys, whoever, they're going to lose this game. And I love that sound. I love when the Bills win on the road, because that sound is great. It's just to hear the whole place quiet down. And of course, there were no fans at any of those road games, so you didn't get a chance to hear that. So yeah, the noise was missed, but more than that, for the road games, it was difficult to kind of adapt to whatever video we're being fed, and it's different than with your eyes. You can choose what you're looking at. Well, you can't do that when you're at the mercy of whatever the director on TV is showing
Yeah, and then just for a quick follow-up on that, is there any progress? I know they're expecting some fans in the stands. Are you expected to travel with the team for every single week, or has that not been announced yet?
Hasn't been announced. I don't know that it's been decided yet. I think they've got a lot of issues. I mean, first and foremost, and as it should be, is football part of it. And they've got to figure out, are they going to have off-season workouts? It appears they're not going to start on time. If they are, what will training camp look like? Will they go off-site? Those are issues that are kind of in front of whether the radio team travels or not. I hope we do. I don't miss the travel as much as I miss the atmosphere. And it is a challenge to do a game in a visiting stadium. Some of them more than others. Some of them you don't get a good look at. But regardless of that, I like the atmosphere of being on the road and watching a team try to win a game on the road. It's not as easy as it is at home.
Right. All right. Transferring over into some specific roster questions here. So are the recent acquisitions of that offensive guard in Jamil Douglas and Forrest Lamp, do you think that's more of a depth spot for competition, or do you think Cody Ford's time could really be done as a starting offensive lineman with the Bills?
I think they're looking for depth, and I think it's smart. I don't think I don't believe, I know I have not seen enough of Cody Ford to make a decision on him yet, whether it's up or down. I don't think he's a bad player. I think he will benefit from having obviously another season under his belt. I'm just looking at my roster here. And I think, they have to kind of figure out a solid spot for Cody Ford, but I wouldn't give up on him. I think he's a talented player and was a fairly early draft pick. And mostly they've got depth, with the guys you mentioned, Jamil Douglas and Forrest Lamp. I mean, replacing people like Winter and others who have come and gone last year. I love the fact that they've got John Feliciano and Darrell Williams coming back. I think ideally they'd love to have the same offensive line, and yeah, including Cody Ford. They have them, they did a really good job in pass protection and a pretty good job in run blocking. I think that's the ideal scenario for the Bills, to have that group with Cody Ford. to start the season as starters, but the additions they made, I view as mostly depth issues, plugging some depth on the O-line.
Right. And yeah, I mean, you can never have enough depth on the O line for sure, especially with some of the injuries that the Bills have dealt with, even 2019 and even last year as well.
Yeah, I mean, Feliciano wasn't even ready to play at the start of the season because he was hurt, and he came in and did a great job. But you never know. I mean, it's so great to see a Bills team. It's not a luxury to do with how they've done it, but they have been able to, build a pretty good roster so they can, they can build depth. That is a absolute provision of something they needed to do in the offseason, and they're doing it because everything is pretty well set. They're going to come back and, I mean, I haven't done it. I could do it. It'll take too much time, but of 22 starters, they're probably going to have at least 20 coming back next year, right? Who are they missing? John Brown. I think they're going to have like 20 or 21 starters coming back, which is pretty good for a team that won 13 games last year, I think.
Exactly.
It's awesome. So obviously Andre Roberts did not re-sign with the Bills. So who would you say is the front runner for punt and kick return duties now that Andre Roberts is gone?
Yeah, I think that remains to be seen. I really, I think they're going to draft somebody who's going to challenge for that job. I believe. I think Isaiah McKenzie has shown that he could handle that position if he had to. I think a draft pick and Isaiah McKenzie would be the top two, but I don't know if there's a front runner yet, and there's plenty of time to figure that out. I think they're likely to draft a defensive back or a wide receiver who will get some reps at punt and kick return, and they're really different jobs now too. Very few kick returns now in the league. Mostly punt returns is the bulk of the work. But I don't know if I'd name a front runner, but I think McKenzie and Mr. X, the draft pick, will be the top two, I guess, right now.
Okay. And kind of speaking with kind of the Isaiah McKenzie thing here, with all the depth that we have at wide receiver right now, do you think there is going to be a spot for a guy like Isaiah Hodgins, who in the beginning of last year, he kind of, he came on strong. Him and Gabriel Davis were kind of, the news out of the training camp was that him and Gabriel Davis were kind of neck and neck. And John Brown even said that they learned the playbook relatively quickly too. So do you see a spot on the roster for him, or do you think he's going to end up probably being back on the practice squad?
Well, he's going to have to work hard to get a spot. I think I'm not writing him off, but there's talented people in front of him, Diggs and Beasley and Emmanuel Sanders, and Gabriel Davis had a good year. McKenzie, we talked about. I think Hodgins has something that most of the receivers don't have, and that's size, and that's, I thought he was a standout in training camp last year, and I was disappointed that he didn't get a chance to play at all. But I think I'll get a chance to compete during training camp and preseason games, and we'll see. I mean, there's a lot of talent there. Duke Williams, I think, is a question mark. I think Jake Kumaro, who came on and actually played in a little bit of regular season action last year, he's going to have to hustle. I mean, how many can they keep? Can they keep more than 5 or 6? Not likely.
Right.
So, Hodgins is in a group of guys who are going to have to show well when they finally get on the field. And that's a good position to be in if you're the Bills, to have that much talent at wide receiver.
Right. And to think, just going back to Josh's rookie year where, we were struggling just to find guys. Their number one receiver was Kelvin Benjamin in 2017, which is, or 2018, sorry, to think about. That Kelvin Benjamin was the number one then.
Even more recently, I mean, going into last year, I think there was a certain amount of expectation level for Duke Williams that he was never called upon to fulfill because they had so much talent there. I mean, Diggs didn't come out of nowhere, but Diggs, I think, exceeded whatever the expectations were with him. So, I mean, they've gotten better for a couple of years in a row now, and we'll see if they got better this year too.
Yeah, and as you mentioned earlier, the Bills are bringing back the majority of their starters, but they are going to have to address some positions in the draft, obviously. So what do you think, as it stands now, is the Bills' biggest draft need?
Well, I mean, I think they could definitely use a little more pass rush, whether it's an outside linebacker or a defensive end. Now, can they get that kind of help at the 30th pick in the first round? I don't know. I think typically pass rush specialists, when they're drafted, take a year to kind of get up to speed and to make their mark. And the Bills afford to wait, maybe, if there's a good guy there at 30. And if it's not a pass rusher, I think you can't go wrong keeping cornerbacks around and drafting a good, solid cornerback. And that's not a reflection at all, really, on the corners they have, in particular Levi Wallace, who I think has really been a gamer and a really good corner for a couple of years in a row now. But I think you could always use some more talent there. And if there's a a standout corner there at number 30, they're going to have to pick him, I think. Yeah, I would think either corner or pass rush specialist would be my first two choices.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And then were you surprised about the signing of Mitchell Trubisky for the Bills, or were you more surprised that Trubisky actually chose the Bills to come here?
Well, a little bit of both, but yeah, I was surprised that they pursued him and signed him. First of all, because I know they loved Matt Barkley, and Josh Allen was very close to Matt Barkley, and he was a good companion piece for Josh Allen and a good sounding board for Josh Allen and a good kind of role model for Josh, kind of teaching him how to handle being a pro. But you got Mitchell Trubisky, who was a premium draft pick. For whatever you think of what the Bears did with him, or maybe they misplayed the pick, maybe they didn't, but he was a premium pick, 3-4 years ago, second overall, right? A really good player. And I think I was surprised because it woke me up. It was like a little, not a slap on the face, but a little tap on the face to me and said, they're going for it now. I mean, as much as they liked Matthew Barkley and as much as Josh liked him, they thought, and they verbalized it. Brandon Beane said, look, if Josh gets hurt, we don't want to lose games or split games. We want to win games. And they went out and got a guy who can do that. Trubisky is a pretty talented player who's won some games with the Chicago Bears. That kind of woke me up like, well, they're not just building for the future or trying to be good and challenge for a Super Bowl down the road. They're going for the Super Bowl this year. I mean, that was the move that illuminated that to me. Like, hey, it's fine to build for the future and think about let's be good down the road. I'm not saying they're going to make it, but they're going for the Super Bowl this year, which I think is really interesting and really fun. I mean, I can't recall. You got to go back almost 30 years to get to a Bills team that went into a season thinking, okay, we're going to go to the Super Bowl. We have to go to a Super Bowl. Look, if they don't go to the Super Bowl, I think they will view this season. Anything can happen, but they'll view this season as a bit of a letdown, and most of the fan base will as well if they don't go to the Super Bowl.
Definitely. So Bills fans know that Star Lotulelei obviously opted out of last season, and he had very good reason to. So Star Lotulelei being, the run stuffer, often takes on double teams. With him coming back this year, how will it help the defensive line, and will it positively impact any player specifically?
Let me take the second part of that question first. I think it will impact and help Ed Oliver. Lotulelei is a bigger body than what they had at the opposite defensive tackle spot for most of last year, and just a stout run defender, bigger than Harrison Phillips and anybody else who played there last year, including Vernon Butler. So in that sense, yeah, I think Ed Oliver has a lot to gain from having Star Lotulelei back there. Overall, I think he provides them with the type of rotational depth that they love to have on the defensive line. They like to have 8 players, interchangeable almost. If you look at the snap counts, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I'm guessing that the D-line, averaged out, the top 7 or 8 guys averaged out to 30-some% of the snaps, which is exactly what they want to do. They don't want anybody getting worn down. They don't want anybody gasping for air. They want good players who make plays and are fresh every time they're on the field. And I think Lotulelei adds to that mix. I don't think there's any reason to worry about did he lose anything from his year off. I don't think he did. He's still a fairly young guy. So I think his return is maybe underrated as an important factor for the Buffalo defense.
Awesome. Anything else?
Yeah, no, that was all I got. I really appreciate you coming on, John. I know I enjoyed it. I hope we can get you on maybe closer to the season.
Sure, I'd love to. Yeah, love to. That was great talking with you. Thanks very much for having me.
Yes,
of course.
Thanks again. Appreciate it.
Okay.